Well, let's go to one of your earliest videos and focus a bit back on gaming here, which is you call it the Gaming Manifesto. Now, your first rule, I wouldn't count as a rule. You say your mileage may vary. This is a personal manifesto. I think that just could have been stated as part of the package. But let's go to what I would call the first real rule. Now, I want to go over each one of these because these are things that could be like topics for videos on their own. Mm-hmm. And this was many, many years ago, over a decade ago, when you made this video. And all these things can be talked about now. So I want to see where you're at now in these things. So the first one is games should be fun.
Yes.
Okay.
There are different values of fun. Right? What's fun for one person might not be fun for somebody else. At the table, you have to compromise with each other. And like a stamp collector leafing through an album is having fun. That might bore you to tears. You might like going on roller coasters, which someone else might find horrifying and vomit-inducing and terrible. These are both fun, right? Yeah. But they're very different kinds of fun. So they should be fun, but like X, value of X. There are many different things that different people consider to be fun.
Okay. Fair. That's a fair. So what you're saying is not fun like you're laughing out loud, but like stress could be fun if you're in a game where you're like going through a hard part, but you're in a weird way enjoying it. So it's not about fun; it's about enjoyment. You would say like games should be enjoyable. Yeah, because
a horror film should ideally scare you or disgust you, or it's a kind of cathartic experience. That's fun in a different way. So yeah,
fair enough. System matters.
Mm-hmm.
Do you still stand on that?
I do still stand on that. Perhaps softened a smidge, like a couple of % or something. I think a talented games master can make just about anything work, but they'll be working against the system, or the system will be working against them. If you try to run a creepy, spooky, long-term, slow burn, investigative Call of Cthulhu game using the feng shui rules, it is going to be incredibly difficult for you to do that, but not impossible. Yeah. No. And equally, if you want to run a Hong Kong action cinema game using Call of Cthulhu, equally, you're going to be having a hard time of it. It's not impossible, but it doesn't exactly work. So to me, the perfect game is one where the setting and the system synergize and work together. So the system helps reinforce the genre expectations and the outcomes that you expect and that sort of thing. So yeah, that's where I am with that.
Yeah, when we think of tabletop role-playing game systems, we're not just thinking about dice rolls. We're talking about setting. We're talking about feeling. We're talking about atmosphere. We're talking about so many things involved in the tabletop role-playing game. So yes, I totally get what you're saying. Then, well, this one leads on. Plausible worlds.
Yeah, that's still very much a guiding principle for all of my game design. Is I'm aiming for plausibility. What I mean by plausibility is that it passes the sniff test in the moment. It seems reasonable that a character with these abilities and so on should be able to do this, but not that. So it's not quite realism, it's more forgiving than that. And maybe you look back on the adventure session later and you think, hang on, that was wrong. But no one noticed, it's fine. So it's a sort of forgiving form of realism, where realism can mean genre emulation. So again, moving back to your Hong Kong cinema example, if you're watching a Hong Kong action movie and one guy throws a pair of magazines across the room and the other guy catches them in his pistols, that's perfectly plausible in that situation, in that kind of film. But it's not in a sort of hard-bitten Swedish crime drama. You wouldn't expect that kind of thing to work. So there are different measures of plausibility, but plausibility overall is always what I'm aiming for.
I'm thinking of going back to like a game like Traveller. When I think about, I get plausible worlds with plausible outcomes of reality, and a good Traveller game master is going to build trust with his players by making every reaction or everything realistic enough that when they do something, they go, "Okay, what's the world's reaction, game master?" And if that world reaction makes sense to the reality they're in, like you're saying, fantasy doesn't matter as long as fantasy is real in that world. Whatever the setup is, as long as it's realistic to that thing.
Yeah, like internally consistent would be another way you could put it. I keep bringing up these guys, but when I used to live in Basingstoke, which is a couple of towns over, there was a group that met to play Traveller regularly, and they were all engineers and mathematicians and computer scientists. And so they had fun really playing strictly by the rules and like getting out their slide rules and calculating delta V and orbital vectors, and they were having a ball. Bored me to tears, but they were having a great time. And they were playing Traveller more as realistic than plausible, where I don't think you necessarily lose anything by simplifying some of those things and not doing complex orbital calculations or whatever else. I think you can still have fun and still play it as hard science without having to go overboard. But they were having a great time, and I wouldn't take that away from them.
Traveller's a mixed blessing. It's like for people like me and you, we can have a lot of fun with it. There is a system set up there for us to be freewheeling and let players do some amazing things. But it is made by a war gamer. And there's elements of it, like you're saying, that if you get deadly serious into the numbers, you can spend all that time on that game. But that game has it's almost like two games in one. Like the way me and you would approach it is completely acceptable by the designer. He is not opposed to, and the game is actually made for our approach. But ironically, like you're saying, it's also a secondary. You're someone who cares about this stuff. You can skip all the stuff me and you might appreciate and go straight to that pure realism. But I get what you're saying. That's Traveller for you. Okay, the next one. I am not a storyteller, but before that, I do want to point something out here. Legion of Myth or Max Liao shared your Stray Crows is up to 15K.
Yes. Thank you. I was very surprised. Let me just look what that is in pounds.
Yep.
Because that's what I'm working in, obviously. Yes, so £11,200. And the next stretch goal is at £13,000, which most of the predictors are saying I should get to. But we're on the long, slow middle of crowdfunding now, so things tend to...
What a successful run, man. We're going to get to the topic at the end of the interview here. It's going to be one of the last things we cover, Stray Crows. But just to say, congrats, and well-earned.
Thank you.
Well-earned. I mean, I'm dead serious. You built up a following. You've invested your life into a lot of things that are behind this thing right now. And it's nice to see a payoff of investment. Sometimes you feel like that's not all that worth it, but at the end here, we're looking at a project that's actually kicking ass for what you're doing. Because it's one thing for an OSR game to blow up, whatever. But when you get these sort of more independent individual games that are outside of that, to see them do really well on any level is just amazingly, especially where you're at right now. It's amazing. Props to you, dude. Yeah.
Thank you.
So we were going on. I'm not a storyteller.
Yes.
I think we were just talking about just now. But all right, let's dig into that.
Yeah, so
sorry.
I really do like the storyteller games. I played Vampire since the day it came out in the UK. I got heavily involved in the live-action roleplay official organization for Vampire and attendant storyteller games in the UK. But I think calling the Games Master a storyteller was a mistake, because what happens then is that you get Games Masters who want to tell you a story, not allow a story to develop from what happens. So you don't. Yeah, story emerges. I usually call it in my design that or adventures that I write, which I don't do that often, but I call it setting up a context in which stories can occur, and that's what you should be doing. And Vampire is very, very good at that. But by calling the person in charge storyteller, it really encouraged railroading and sort of dictatorial sort of games mastering, while trying to be about narrative and character at the same time. If you were lucky, you got someone who understood that. If you were unlucky, you got someone who's trying to foist their bad fanfic on you. And in the LARP society, there's certainly more of the people trying to foist their bad fanfic on you. So yeah, that's left me with kind of a sour taste in my mouth when it comes to overly narrative focused games. So it's something I either say explicitly or I imply in most of my games, is that story should emerge from what's going on. It shouldn't really be imposed, and that's part of the reason I don't write a lot of adventures.
That was my one criticism of World of Darkness when I crossed over and tried Vampire and did a few of them. I was like, well, story emerges from D&D, but then when I get over to World and I'm running it as a game master, I start realizing it's all that's happening here. It's just that World of Darkness does a special focus on narrative in the way that it was in D&D, but it's not focused on a lot in the language. They're focused on performance. World of Darkness focus on it like verbally in their game. Yeah. Again, D&D, you can find hints of all this stuff, but it was never a pure focus textually. It doesn't drill it at you. When you get to World of Darkness, they just said, like, we're actually going to not just sort of sleight hand throw this in there that you're doing it or that narrative counts. We're actually going to focus on it on purpose.
Yeah.
It was like
great. Yeah, most of that was in the presentation, and I think that does matter. I mean, if you look at Lamentations of the Flame Princess, mostly it's just basic D&D, but the way in which it's presented to you, the way in which it's talked about in the book, the way in which it's conveyed to you makes it feel like a whole different game. In a similar way, like Storyteller, the system is somewhere in the middle when it comes to crunch. There's a few bits and pieces in there like Humanity, which sort of encourage you to think about sort of narrative mechanics and so on. But for the most part, it's a fairly conventional RPG mechanically.
Yeah. And
then it's the presentation that really pushed it in that direction.
I think it was ahead of its time.
Yeah, I think it was the next logical step after the Hickman Revolution, where you had to focus on story and Dragonlance and so on. I mean, Dragonlance suffered from it a bit as well because you had the books, and so there was a story going on without you if you were playing in that world. And some of the same things happened with Vampire, with the whole idea of the meta plot that was going on. So you had to buy all the books to keep up with what was going on. Great marketing, not so great for running games where you could be effectual. But yeah.
No, I do say I do have a special place in my heart for World of Darkness. Like you say, the lore was so enticing, but like you feel like you were sometimes outside of some of the lore you're reading with that game. Like it's about different people. It's not about me, baby. Like,
just before we move on, I did have one other pet hate about World of Darkness books. Was that often you didn't have a reliable narrator. Like as a games master, you couldn't be sure what was true. And they hid a lot of information in bad writing, bad stories, short stories that people put in the books. And I didn't appreciate having to wade through that to find out what was going on.
That was not good. I still go back to that old school, throw out some things you don't like. All right, the next one. Agendas are boring.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
So I would probably amend that slightly. I've probably softened a little bit on that. What I mean by that is, well, hopefully this doesn't offend anyone, but it's what I call the Christian rock problem. Right? If you've listened to Christian rock, 99% of it is complete ass. And why is it complete ass? I mean, there are things like gospel choirs and so on. That's religious music. It's fantastic. Whole bunch of classical musicians did religious music. It was fantastic. Why is Christian rock ass? And it's because they put the message first ahead of the music. And if you do that, you're likely to end up with something that is not as good as it could be. It's why all of Rage Against the Machine's later albums are rubbish, apart from the first one. Right? Clearly they've been working on that one for a while, and so the quality was there. But after that, it just tails off pretty rapidly. And so if you're trying to propagandize through your games or your writing or your art or whatever, then you're not really making art anymore. You're propagandizing. And so it suffers. And like I was saying, we live in an age without nuance, where people can't understand subtext and subtlety. The point of the X-Men was that they were picked on and prejudiced over by society because they were different, and you could then project whatever you wanted onto that. Right? That was subtext, and it was universally applicable. You could apply it to race relations, you could apply it to LGBT, you could apply it to disability, and the X-Men could be a stand-in for all of these things that you cared about and saw yourself in. But now everything has to be explicit, so it's not enough that the X-Men are hated and hunted because they're mutants. Well, we've also got to make a bunch of them like expressly political. We've got to make a bunch of them really obvious.
Their connection is the generic side of what they're doing, saying we can connect with anyone who feels oppressed by it for whatever reason. And
exactly.
we don't care what side of a fence that you're on.
That was the genius and the universality of it. And it's the same with most other things. It's fine to have an agenda. It's fine to have to. It's fine to want to put it out through your work, but for God's sake, use a bit of talent and subtlety and artistry. Don't just conk people over the head with it.
Well, that's why I love the Beastie Boys, because the Beastie Boys, ironically, had a lot to say. But like what you're saying is, they did the one thing wise that you would, I think, support, which is put the art before the message. And then if the message comes in, it supports the art, but the art is not secondary to what they got to say. And they say a lot of really out there things in some of their later, but it's all art first. And you can see the quality all the way down the line, which is my way of understanding what you were saying when you started pointing out the different rock and the different group. I'm like, I get what you're saying, because the Beastie Boys do exactly what you would advise to, which is put the art first, and then if you got a message you can throw in there, go ahead. But if the art isn't first, now it's just propaganda, not art. Yeah. Totally get that. Okay. Now, the next one is a pretty straightforward one, but I mean, if you got something to say on it, fair enough. I make what I love.
Yeah. I make things primarily for me because I want to. I'm not about to particularly follow any trends or anything unless they actually interest me. And I think work is usually better when you do that rather than chasing trends and algorithms and whatever's hot right now.
Yep.
Because you're always going to be following if you do that, and you're never going to hit as hard as the person that broke the ground. So I would rather do my own thing, even if it's less successful.
1,000,000%. I get you don't want to be generic part two. You want to be yourself. You want to bring your own little thing to the thing. I totally get that as well. I hate being I'm not a copycat, so whenever I do something similar, I try to bring some of my own gimmick. So I feel where you're coming from.
Yeah. I actively sabotage myself if I get too popular with something. So I deliberately try and piss people off immediately afterwards.
There's some videos where that's the way it does feel. Like when I was going through your videos, even though I was like, there's a lot here, but I'd be like hitting ones where I'm like, he's just trolling. That's just straight trolling.
Very rarely, but sometimes.
Yeah. Okay, next one. Once it is out, I don't own it anymore.
Yeah. I think a lot of game designers get incredibly precious about what they've made, and I understand that. And if you were publishing something, if you were just publishing a storybook or a film or something, then that's static media, and the worst you're going to get is people interpreting it wrong. But with role-playing games, or to a lesser extent computer games, what you're putting out there is interactive, and people are going to do what they want with it. Like the Gibson quote, the street finds its own use for things. So it is completely pointless getting precious about your game and how it should be played and who should be playing it and who isn't allowed to play it. You can't stop anyone. If you produce a game and for some reason a whole bunch of neo-Nazis love it and start buying it, take their money, spend it on something super gay. Right? Their money spends as well as anyone else's does. So
damn right.
You know.
Damn right. I love the way you put that at the end. That's a good one. Okay. I don't know where you stand now on this, but at the time you said, I am not a professional.
That's tricky, because by any objective measure at this point, I guess I am, because I've been doing this 25 years plus a whole bunch of sort of fanzines and things, sort of semi-professional before that. But my attitude is not a professional one. I mean, if I'm working for someone else, I'll do the work, I'll do my level best to get it done on time. Professional in that sense, but this is a hobby industry. And I think if you come at it with a corporate mindset, as I think Games Workshop and Wizards of the Coast and Hasbro have been increasingly finding, then you're not necessarily going to have an easy time of it. You might stay the biggest because you've got the biggest budget and the biggest potential audience and the rest, but it's not going to be an easy ride. I think you need to approach role-playing games as more of a hobby, more of a craft, more of almost a sort of folk tradition. And if you look at other communities that do that sort of thing, like my wife's into all kinds of fiber art stuff, like crochet, knitting, all of that stuff. Those kind of communities, they're not very commercial. They really enjoy supporting small creators who maybe raise goats on their own land, card their own wool, dye it and sell it. You know, and there's a lot of that same attitude in role playing, where a lot of us like to support indie creators and get to know the people. So it's more personable and amateurish, but in a good way, in that you have that connection. I don't mean like parasocial, whatever. It's just, you know, you're helping out someone who has a creative voice. Maybe you know a bit more about them. You know that you're supporting them. We support each other by sharing ideas and systems and shouting each other out on our channels or our social media. If you approach it with that mindset, the dreaded word community, right? I know, but it does kind of apply because we all share an interest. If you approach it with that sort of viewpoint, make time for each other, help each other out, I think that helps everyone. You know, a rising tide lifts all boats and all that, which is probably too hippie-ish for people, but it's how I feel.
The way I look at it is you have a rebel mindset, and the idea is, even though rebels are independent people, it's also the idea of coming together. Sort of makes sense to me. It's helping other people, allow them to be rebels by saying we're going to support each other, so you don't have to be locked into this commercial gimmick. And we know without some support, you can't be independent. That's how hard it is to be independent in a lot of things now. To be the rebel, to be that guy. Like 20 or 30 years ago, that door might have been open for a lot of people. In the last 10, 15 years, that door is slammed closed. You're independent, you're a rebel, you can't even come in. And so guys like you who have that sort of free-minded mindset, you probably go into it going, we're not coming together as a community, as some corporate community. We're coming together to say there's other people like us that don't have the same access to that independent path into what we're doing. And all we're doing is opening a door in a like-minded way, instead of we don't own you, but we'll help you get in here. Well, that's sort of the way it comes across to me.
Yeah, fundamentally, I don't think I'm better than anybody else. I've got experience, but like I treat my community as friends and acquaintances, not as customers. I will always try to make time for people. I will always try and help people out or give them advice, make resources available to them where I've already created them, things like that. I found in more recent years where I've begun to slow down a bit, getting old, and my health isn't so fantastic. But spending more time like mentoring and helping and advising other people really brings me a sense of enjoyment and accomplishment that's been missing for a while. So I just really enjoy doing that.
Well, we're answering sort of two questions at once. So I want to ask you to go on about this one because we're talking about now relationships are business. And that's you're sort of talking about being friendly with people you're dealing with now and forming that community. Does that sort of relate to that sort of statement right there? Relationships are business?
Yeah, it does relate to that. And the way in which you relate to your audience or potential audience, it does matter. Like I actively choose to be open about the things that interest me and my politics, even though my politics aren't necessarily manifest in my games, because why should I have to censor and control myself to conform to some corporate standard or something? Here I am, take me as I am. But also, when you're in business with other people, I mean, you're saying this is a very old video, so I was probably doing a lot more freelancing at the time. But you might be the most brilliant auteur game designer ever, but if you can't turn a manuscript in on time, if you can't rein your ego in when you're dealing with an art director or an editor or a line developer or whatever, you're not gonna do very well, however brilliant you are. I don't think I'm a particularly talented game designer or writer. I can be slightly funny occasionally. That's what got me going in a professional career. But I was able to turn the material in on time, and I didn't kick up a stink too badly when people wanted to edit it too much, you know? And that's what let me get my foot in the door and end up here.
So I get what you're saying. You're independent in your mindset, but there's still a level of professionalism that has to happen. Like, say, relationships are business. You got to show up on time. You got to, and the better people can trust you, the better relationships people have with you, the more they want to work with you.
Yeah, and I still don't particularly view it as professionalism. So, like, I did a lot of freelance work for Mongoose Publishing way back when. Matt Sprange or Sprang, however you pronounce it, I always get it wrong. But you know, the main thing was I wanted to complete the project on time for him because I kind of like the guy and I want to stay fairly friendly with him. You know, so it's more like doing a favor for a mate rather than it is clocking in at a job, doing your hours in a suit sort of mindset. It's a different mindset. It's that more,
I get what you mean,
hobby craft sort of mindset. Yeah.
So I get what your relationships are agreements where you got to come through. That's the business side of it. You got to treat it like a business. Like every deal you're doing has to come through, and then people want to work with you when you are that person. Totally get where you're coming from. Okay, the next one will be. This is one where you curse. I can be an asshole, but you are a prick. And I'll just mention a guy named Andrew, and I won't even mention his last name. There you go. You can take it from there.
I think people who are assholes, for the most part, it's part of who they are, right? Very, very broadly speaking, right? If you self-describe as an asshole, you know you're an asshole, right? And you can be difficult, and you can be strident, and you can be all of these other things, but it's not usually something you actively choose to do to other people. Whereas if you're a prick, you're actively being a prick to other people. You are choosing prickness. It is something you do to people rather than something you are. So if I piss you off, usually it's not because I intend to, but I can also be a prick sometimes. But if you're coming at me generally speaking, you're being a prick. You're choosing to do it, right?
I get what you're saying. I get what you're saying. It's you can be an asshole in your own defense, right? But if people don't push you there, you're fine. You're saying the other person is just being a prick no matter which way you come at them, and they're choosing to be that. And that's sort of what makes that sour grapes for you is with those people. It's like saying, like, look, I can defend myself, but I'm not out here punching innocent people in the face. Yeah. What you're saying to the other guy is, you're out here punching innocent people in the face. Yeah. So that's the difference between me and you. I can be vicious, but I'm not attacking people. You can be vicious and you're freely attacking people. That's a separation when the asshole. I just wanted to, I'm glad we're on the same page. Now, the last statement you make, which the one that made me laugh, fuck them if they can't take a joke.
Yes.
Go ahead.
So, that was an ideal I was working towards at the time, because I did care what other people thought, and like I wanted to be popular, I wanted to be successful, and more than anything, I still want people to understand what I'm saying. I want people to pick up what I'm laying down. Mm-hmm. And at some point, and I think I've reached that point finally, after however many years it's been, at some point you just have to accept that some people are never going to get it. They're never going to understand you. They don't want to understand you, so they're not going to put the effort in to understand you.
Exactly. Yeah.
It's far easier for them to continue in whatever misapprehension it is. And unfortunately, and this is a terrible thing to admit as a writer, there is no magical combination of words that can convince a person. Some people, sure. Everyone, no. Some people just will not be convinced. So it's another thing you just have to kind of let go and let it stop bothering you. It still does bother me. I'm still working on it, but I think I'm most of the way there.
Because there's so much. There's so many reasons you want people to open the door, or they don't know who you are. Or there's a side of you when you turn the camera off that other people you express it to. You're like, why am I unable to? Or even if I could at this stage, people have decided it's no more on the table. I know what that's like. I can express a completely different side of me during streams like this, or streams with anyone. And some people have just chosen, this is who you are already, Steven. That's it. The line's been crossed. You're over, baby. So
yeah,
I totally get where you're coming from. Well, I knew going into that video and looking over all those points was going to be valuable, because every one of these points could be their own videos, and I know these are things you talk about over the years or even recently. So I knew this was all going to be stuff you were comfortable with.